Hi, it's Jen again. I just thought I would go ahead and update anybody who might be following my visual novel project, Soul Union, as to where I am right now in development. So far, I am over halfway done with the epilogues. 6 of them are completed out of the 12, and I've started on the remaining 6. Most of the sprites are finished. So I feel pretty confident in in saying that my original goal of February, the end of February, for the next release update is very obtainable, and I'm super excited going forward. I also wanted to share some just background information about Soul Union and how I originally came up with the idea and how it's developed over the years. For those of you who might just be a little bit more curious to learn more about the Soul Union, I guess, world and history without spoiling anything in the end for the endings of the game. So Soul Union started out as a epic fantasy adventure comic back in around 2000, I think, is when I started on it. I have some old artwork here. This was done with Prismacolor markers because at the time I didn't know how to do any CG coloring. The main character was Mikhail, and he was a human orphan, as he is still in the current iteration. And Keska was his biological sister whom he got separated from. Circumstances happened to Keska and she died a tragic death, but being a rather spunky character, her ghost ends up basically haunting Mikhail, and he is spurred to go on a hero's journey to kind of avenge her death, her untimely demise. And in the process, he ends up meeting a soul weaver named Ilian, who is the elf, who is now the main protagonist in the game. And the 3 of them kind of went on some wacky hijinks adventures. The plot didn't have a really clear direction. I was a pretty immature creator at the time, so it was really more just about kind of creating fun characters and having fun story arcs that were telling the character's story, but there wasn't a whole lot of there wasn't a really cohesive message throughout the entire story. It just kind of meandered all over the place. And everything was done by hand, including the screen tones were cut out and pasted into the physical comic book pages, and so a lot of that is not very well archived now. Several years later, I was working on some short stories, and I wanted to revisit some of my older comic book story ideas that I had and condense them in kind of like one shot, just short stories. I was trying to practice that format and just become a little bit more concise with my storytelling. So I did make a short story called Threads that was based on the Soul Union comic, and I revisited the characters Mikhail, Keska, and Ilian once more. The tone of the story was a little bit more somber, a little bit less lighthearted and silly as the original comic was. But I kind of just went straight for the, meat and potatoes of what I thought the original story was trying to say. Rather than have Mikhail as the protagonist, I decided to start with Ilian and Keska, and I really enjoyed the dynamic between the two. Just Ilian being more of a cynical character and Keska being more outgoing and hopeful. Now by this time I knew how to use Photoshop and I was doing more digital art. So although this comic was hand-drawn, it was scanned in and the gray tones were done in the computer, so I do have scans of this comic, and I'm going to go ahead and make it available for download here for anybody who might be just kind of bored and curious. This is the same comic that I have posted on DeviantArt, but I think my DeviantArt gallery is kind of hard to navigate, and it's not a really friendly place to try to put up a sequence of comic pages. So I'm just gonna make it a downloadable zip file here that just makes it easy. I have to confess that Soul Union as like a world and as the characters, it wasn't something that I was super attached to, in the sense that I had like a driving desire over the decades to tell this story. It wasn't something that I planned to revisit again. I thought I was done with it after I wrote that short story. But after my son was born, I started having a lot of complicated feelings about adoption and my own adoption experience. And because so many of my memories, my childhood, are just very fragmented and difficult for me to navigate, I did what I always did when I was young, which was to escape in fantasy. I think a lot of people think that autobiographical stories are the type of stories that creators will go to in order to kind of process trauma or difficult experiences. But I personally, I don't share this belief. I think that those kinds of stories are really good for creating more awareness over certain issues. But when it comes to my own personal journey, I find the more that I work through my own personal issues and kind of grow as a person, rather than find that I have like unique experiences that are all centered around like very specific events in my life, I feel like more I have very like general kind of issues that may have revolved around like certain very specific events, but like how they made me feel and how I deal with them are a lot more general and a lot more relatable than just saying, only adoptees can understand this problem. Certainly, there are issues that are very specific within adoption, and adoptees should definitely have the voice to be a part of those conversations. But when it comes to just general feelings of like isolation and self-identity and distrust and cynicism, these are all issues that I feel more comfortable talking about in broader terms that I think a lot of people can just relate to. And that is what I really love about fantasy. I love being able to talk about issues that are very near and dear to my heart in more very broad and abstract and removed terms. This is the way that I like to deal with heavy issues, because I feel like then in some ways going to a completely foreign and fantastical world breaks down a lot of like the barriers that might make people feel like they're different from other people, that anybody within like the shared humanity can have the same experience reading a fantasy book, because it's not specific to reality, to real experiences. That makes any sense at all. I hope that my game can provide a little bit of comfort to other people who might be feeling a little isolated and a little cynical right now, how I was feeling at the time that I was writing it. I don't want to inflate my own self-importance, but if my game can help even one person, then I will feel really good about that. I guess it already has in some ways because it helped me. I would love to be able to share that and help somebody else in the process. Thank you again so much for those of you who are following and supporting my project. I can be a little awkward sometimes, but I just really, really do appreciate that, and it warms my heart so much when somebody gives me a comment that they could connect to this project in some way or another. Please take care of yourself, be well, and enjoy the process. Thanks again so much. Take care. Bye-bye.